Are your children's emotions taking you on a roller coaster ride? Well, don't worry, mine too. Coming up on the Mum Show today, we are going to be exploring the wonderful world of feelings. Welcome to the Mum Show. My name's Marina and today I'm joined by Becky from Care for the Family and child therapist Emma Brown. And we are today going to be diving deep into the big pool of emotions that our children are experiencing. Now, I'm really looking forward to this episode because it feels like a massive topic, doesn't it?
It is massive, and it's another one of my favourites.
Emma's ready. She's ready to go and educate us. Yeah. I think, like being a child, I remember just having such extreme emotions at times. I remember being 1 minute, particularly around my siblings, like 1 minute I'm full of excitement and everything's hilarious and everything's brilliant, but then sometimes just feeling angry. I felt I could go from hilarity to anger quite easily as a child, but there are, you know, ages and stages where emotions do run wild with kids, don't they?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Absolutely. I think they still do sometimes when you're an adult. So I think it's nuts, isn't it?
What are the kind of moments, if you like, the red flag zones when we go, okay, things could be happening more emotionally right now?
Well, I think it's really important to think of our emotions. I mean, what are emotions? Because we talk about feelings and emotions, but what actually are they? I think it's really important to kind of educate ourselves and our children that they are physiological responses in our bodies. You know, we feel them in our bodies. How do we know when we're feeling angry? We have a feeling, we have a response, we have a reaction inside our bodies. And I think it's really important to think about it, or it's quite helpful to think about it in a bit of a continuum. So if you can imagine, between 0 and 10 is our emotional expression. 10 being like the most extreme rage or panic you might experience, and that gets expressed. And then 0 being kind of almost numb or cut off from your emotions. Those are the extreme ends. And then we have what's classed in the middle as our window of tolerance, which is, maybe from, maybe a 4 to a 6, where we're kind of calm and alert, we're regulated, we're okay in ourselves, we kind of all is okay in the world. But however we get triggered, we can either go into a hyper-aroused state, which would be that kind of more where our nervous systems is highly aroused and we start expressing all of these different emotions, or we go to a hypo-aroused state where we kind of we get more numb and cut off from our emotions. And I think so it depends on which way we go, will depend on what's going to be most helpful to bring us back to that state of kind of regulation. And it's the same for our children.
It's really interesting hearing it as like a physiological thing and something that's actually physically happening. Because I think if our children came into us and they had a cut arm or they'd broken their leg, we would see the extreme of that and we would be really quick to say, we need to call a doctor or we need to get a plaster for you. We'd be really quick and we'd be super aware. I think as parents, we can often be really aware of if you bang your head, then these are the checks that I need to do. I've got my thermometer in the cupboard and ready. But actually, this is a physical thing as well, and we need to be curious about that too.
Yeah, because we all have emotions and we all have feelings, don't we? But often we are not taught how to process them or how to recognise them even. I know that lots of adults, me included, I didn't recognise some of my feelings because I didn't learn that when I was younger.
Yeah.
And actually, we can help our kids for later life as well by helping them kind of recognise and become aware and process well as children.
Yeah. There's a big bit of research that's been done recently, and basically it looks at what kind of emotions we can recognise. And most adults, I think it was about 80% of the adults, were only really able to recognise the 3 main biggies, which is being angry, being sad, or being happy. And we're not very good at knowing the kind of nuanced type of emotions or feelings that come out. And I think that's because, like you say, Becky, we're not educated. We're not educated in recognising emotions in ourselves, let alone in other people. So, I mean, I feel like the tide is turning slowly, and I feel like, as a the culture is shifting, and I think it won't be long before we're learning this in the classrooms. Well, that's my real hope anyway. But in the meantime, as parents, we can do our bit, can't we?
Absolutely. We're fighting off, I think, a very long time, especially in the UK, where you've had the stiff upper lip and you calm it down. And I think often as parents, there might be, my child is upset, so try to distract or try to pull away, try to come up with something different, try to rescue so that the sadness all disappears. But it's actually, it's helpful, isn't it, for us to realise that if something's going on in the body, if we could see it outside the body, we would, jump to it and try to somehow assist. And we've got to do that the same with things that are happening inside.
Yeah, and it starts with us. Like everything that we talk about on this show, it has to start with us. If we are not being able to recognise and tune into what our internal experience is, how on earth will we be able to do that and give our children that language? It's it's just essential that we can do that for ourselves really first.
Yeah.
It's hard when there's been like unhelpful things that we pick up, so big boys don't cry or sayings like that. Do you know what? That's actually not helpful at all, because that's how we've learned, maybe in my generation. Actually, that's not helpful I've got 2 boys, so that's really not helpful, because they need to be able to cry, and I want them to be able to express their emotions. And sometimes we want to fix it all, don't we? We want to help them get out of that state. You don't want them to be distressed. You don't want them to feel that. So you do distract or you dismiss it, but actually that's not helping the process then for later life either.
Absolutely, and it absolutely will contribute to mental health difficulties later on in life, without a doubt. When we try and push down and negate and ignore and dismiss our emotions or our child's emotions because it's too difficult or it's painful to witness or to see, we're teaching children that it's not okay to show or express emotions. It's not okay to feel what I'm feeling. And so it all gets suppressed, and it will inevitably come out later on in life. There's a really good phrase that has always stuck with me: what we resist persists.
Yeah,
basically, when we really try and ignore or cut off from those difficult feelings, it will just keep coming back in whatever form.
That's it. I like that you've said in whatever form, because sometimes I feel like, especially with boys, not being allowed to cry, that sense. And you do still, I wouldn't say to my son, you don't cry. We've talked about the fact, it can heal and it can help physical pain sometimes, just having that rush of tears coming out. But plenty of people will tell him around him if they see him cry. A passerby will tell him, oh, don't cry, you're a big boy, and things like that. But it's so unhelpful, because it will come out in another form. And often with boys, it will come out with violence or aggression or anger. And then they go from being a really sad child to being a child we would deem naughty. And, it's just setting them up, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And you often see just above the waterline, you see that tip of the iceberg, don't you? Don't actually see what's underlying. Or you have to dig a little deeper to find out why are they acting that way then, to find out what's happening.
It's being curious and looking beyond the behaviour, isn't it? Because even I know for myself, so one of the main things about emotional intelligence, which is what we want to kind of have for ourselves and our children, the first kind of, there's 3 parts of it. The first is the self-aware bit. So that involves me recognising, oh, I'm feeling jealous right now. But it's not just staying with that, because if I dig a little deeper, what's that jealousy really about? What's underneath the jealousy? Okay, if I scratch the surface a little bit, I can maybe recognise I'm feeling jealous because I'm really frightened of losing somebody, or I'm frightened of rejection, or whatever it is. And then actually what I then might realise is that it doesn't look like I'm frightened. It looks like I'm angry, because I might be stomping around or kind of getting irritated. And so when you just start to really kind of scratch the surface and look under that iceberg, like Becky says, you kind of, you realise that there's so much of a story and a narrative there that we need to unpick and make sense of. And we need to do that for ourselves, and then we need to help our children do that as well. And the second part is that perspective taking. So when we can tune in and become self-aware, we're much more able to then recognise those emotions in other people, which is the basis of, you know, being able to empathise with others.
Yeah.
And then the third part is the regulation bit, which, you know, we might come on to later, but that's about how do we move through that feeling once we've recognised it.
Just picking up on what you were saying about the storytelling, I watched this mum. I was working with her boys, and she did it so masterfully. I was like, that is incredible. And she has two boys, and one of them is older, he's 10, and one of them is 6. And both of them wanted to come to my filmmakers group and my actors group and do all the different things that I work with them. And it was all going very well, but the younger one just didn't have the confidence and didn't yet have the kind of sticking power. You know, it was a bit too much of a long session. I usually advise age 7, so I'm like, yeah, it's cool. Come back next year, there's no problem. Anyway, because of what we'd been doing, we later decided to catch up and do some filming with him. So I'm working with his older brother, and the little one just fell into a heap of tears on the floor and then started running away because he was feeling so silly. And the mum brought him over, and she just started asking him lots of questions and being curious. And I noticed that her reaction wasn't to suppress the tears, but just to really ask him some really gentle questions. And she said, why do you think you might be crying right now? And he said, I feel so jealous. I feel so jealous. He's got all the attention. And she said, but why do you think you find that jealous? I mean, and actually before then she said, that's so brave of you to see that. Wow. That's so brave of you. Why do you think you're feeling jealous right now? And he said, because I want to be doing that, but I don't feel like I can because I get shy. And so then she was able to just uncover with him the fact that, you know, there was this insecurity that was causing him to get jealous, that was causing him to melt down. And just watching him piece that story together really helped him understand himself. And I just thought, what an amazing gift.
It's amazing. And she'd obviously given him language to put to that as well. Because, you know, to recognise jealousy is quite tricky sometimes.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, you said most adults can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah. No, it's how do we teach our children all this range of emotions? We have to name, you know, we talk about this idea of naming it to tame it. You know, if you name an emotion and you're as an adult, you can recognise the emotion in your child, and you're saying, it seems like you might be feeling really disappointed, or it seems like you might be feeling really cross right now. It gives them a language of, I am feeling cross, and Mummy gets it. Mummy really understands me. So again, they feel seen and heard in that as well.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's really nice when you see it working. It's another one of those opportunities where it can be seen as such a negative thing. Oh, my child is so emotional, but it can also be seen as such a positive thing. Absolutely. Like, I can really tune into my child because they're open with their emotions, and because, you know, because they're having this moment, we're able to draw closely together.
Yeah. It does take time though, doesn't it? So you have to give the time to that process as well, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's hard in the busyness of a family life. You know, if I tried to do that every time my child cried, I can't quite picture that. So it's finding those teachable moments when they're in a space where you think, actually, this is a really worthwhile time for that conversation.
Actually, I think sometimes you can add those in, even when they're not emotional, so you can just have the habit that before bedtime, you can have a little chat about, you know, how are you feeling when this happened, and what happened, because that's giving them the language. So that, I guess there's a lap over then, isn't there? There's a time when they stop needing you to sit down at every point because they're remembering.
Yeah, they internalise it, and they possess the language themselves to be able to make sense in a situation when you're not with them present. So when you're not able to name it for them, they can begin to name it for themselves. But those teachable moments, particularly bedtimes, you know, that it's, you know, goes back to that regulate, relate, and then reflect. You know, the 3 R's that are so kind of crucial in terms of that emotional intelligence.
Lovely. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to a girl called Poppy. She's 12 years old, and I think she's been really honest and open about talking about some of the real complex emotions that as a 12-year-old girl she is going to go through. Wow. So here we are, a little story from Poppy.
Sometimes when my sister just gets really on my nerves, there's just something inside me that goes, I am really annoyed with her. I don't know why she's doing this to me. I'm just gonna hit her and run away. If I react in the moment, then first of all, I'll do it without realising what I've just done. Then I'll see it and I'll feel really guilty inside. Other things I can get angry with is if people don't understand my point, or if we don't get to do things that I would like to do. Sometimes I feel like I can express my emotions, sometimes I feel I can't, and I've got to keep them inside. Sometimes you will express them because you just feel like it's not right. Sometimes you will keep them in you and deep down, and you'll hide that from someone else, and because you feel like, oh, what if they think badly of me if I tell them why I'm angry? When I get angry and I take myself away, the thoughts going around my head are things like, why did this have to happen? Why was I so stupid to let this happen? Or like, I'm an idiot, or I don't deserve this or that. And those are the thoughts that are not very healthy for your brain. Sometimes that anger will change to loneliness, and you'll suddenly feel maybe alone. I sometimes feel quite alone, and I get angry about some things and sad. You've got to share your feelings with people you trust, otherwise the bad thoughts can get inside your head and they will start. You'll dwell on these horrible thoughts, and to get yourself out of that feeling of I'm not good enough, I usually would talk to someone I trust. So that could be a parent or a guardian, maybe even a teacher that you really like. You just feel kind of safer and more relaxed. And if you're tensing, you just kind of just have to relax a bit and listen to what they've got to say. Even though they might not have experienced it, they might still have some advice and they might still be able to help you.
Amazing.
So insightful for a 12-year-old. It's incredible.
She really is. For me, I feel like it gives me hope that there is a tide turning. You were talking earlier about, children becoming educated in school around their feelings along with all the other subjects. And, just listening to Poppy, you do think, well, actually, I think as a culture we are getting the importance of our emotions a bit more.
I think it's very clear to me, though, that she's also been brought up in a home where feelings and emotions have been allowed to be expressed. And not only are they allowed to be expressed, but they can, she's been able to feel safe enough to work through those emotions within her family. And actually that's been internalised, so that now as a 12-year-old, she can even turn to a teacher or a friend when she's struggling and she needs to regulate and connect with somebody else. It's really amazing.
Yeah. And it was really beautiful to see the journey she went on with her thought process. It was just brilliant, and if we can try and help our children discover that, then actually that's really, really helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, I don't know, maybe I found it reassuring or interesting, was she talks about, we are talking about a girl who is insightful and who's had great things placed around her, and she's got the language that we're talking about, but still, when she's going on that journey of her emotions, she says sometimes anger turns to loneliness, and loneliness turns to make me feel stupid or silly or an idiot or why did I do that? Yeah. And then she says she doesn't deserve something. Yeah. And that's a real kind of internalising your shame around something. That's not, oh, whoops, I've made a bad choice. That's I'm bad. And that my choice is a reflection of that. Yeah. And for, a child who is clearly doing brilliantly, I find that really interesting because it's an easy place for our kids to go, and it's good for us to know that as mums, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's a very understandable place for us to go, because that kind of, and she names it, doesn't she? She talks about kind of that feeling of not feeling good enough. And that is something I think as humans we all experience. Some of us are more connected to it than others, but we all experience that feeling of and actually what she described that she got into was that looping of what we call rumination, where the negative thought cycle just escalates and escalates. So it starts with, I've done a bad thing, to to, I don't deserve things. I don't deserve good things to happen to me. And she got to that place pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But actually, the resilience and the positive part is that she knows what she needs to do to get back to that place of regulation. So you can almost see that, so she got angry, which was, maybe a number 8 on the emotional scale. Yeah. She then withdrew to her bedroom. She kind of felt lonely and cut off. So she maybe went into a hypo-aroused state at that point. She knew she needed to do something to get back to that place of feeling okay again. So she went and spoke to her mum. And that's that connection that we all need. It's the first thing that we need when we're feeling triggered or dysregulated, is that connection with somebody else. It's a natural instinct that we all have. We need that connection with somebody else to feel okay again.
That's amazing.
So if we have a little think and there's somebody watching this and they're like, okay, yeah, got it, need to help my kids with their emotions, but it is a massive journey ahead. We need to help educate our children around emotions and emotional health. What have you both done in your families to try and do that? And what would you recommend for other people who might be looking for options?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I suppose speaking from my experience as a psychotherapist, and I'm talking about kind of adults here, because I know I say this a lot, but it has to start with us. In order for us to be able to help our children tune into their emotions, we need to tune into ours. And so a really helpful kind of another acronym we can use is the RAIN acronym, and this is something I use a lot with adult clients, and that is to be able to recognise, allow, investigate and then nurture. And it takes us through the whole process of being able to, first of all, recognise what it is that I'm feeling right now when we get triggered. And when I say recognise and allow, it's like really tuning in to our bodies. And we can do this with our child. So when we notice either we're feeling angry, we can think, right, where in my body am I feeling this? So get curious, add curiosity to that emotion, because that, it softens it, but it also helps us to kind of understand it and unpick it a bit more. So, I tend to hold my kind of emotion very much in my stomach. So my stomach might be in knots. It might feel like a constriction feeling or a pressure feeling. So be curious about what it feels like in your body, and be curious with your child. Children are so imaginative. They're really good at being able to visualise and, what colour is the emotion? What does it look like? How is it moving? Really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of helping your child to understand all of what that might look like and what it feels like. So that's the recognise and allow it to be there. And then investigate with kindness. So it's not about, oh, why have I just done that thing again, and beating yourself up. It's more, I always get triggered by that, because maybe I've just been triggered because actually I've had a really long day, and this has happened and this has happened. So of course, when that thing extra has happened, this is how I've reacted. So it's being able to really kind of investigate and work out why it is that you feel the way you feel. And again, with your child, be curious. I wonder why it is that you feel like that. Like you were describing with the story earlier, being able to kind of ask why questions is really helpful. Kind of get on the floor, get the good eye contact. And then the final part of the RAIN is the N, which is the nurture bit, and that is about the regulation. That's about what do we need to do to help you to get back to a place where you're feeling okay again. And one of the things that we can do is, we've all got, because we feel an emotion physically, we go to our bodies. Anything we tend to be in this culture almost like disembodied. We're so much in our heads when actually our emotions are in our bodies. And if we can get back to a place of, kind of embodiment, and so getting your child to work out what it is that they're feeling, where it is, what it looks like, and then being able to maybe breathe into that, helping them to use their breath to be able to breathe into that area. So for me, if it's located in my tummy, I might take some breaths and just almost imagine that feeling kind of getting dispersed as I'm breathing in and breathing out. And a really, good way again to help children with a little breathing exercise is the 3-6. So you breathe in for 3 seconds and breathe out for 6. And as they're breathing out, get them to imagine a birthday cake with a candle. And so what you're trying to do is not blow the candle out, but blow it so that it flickers. Yeah, so a real... and then say, and now what does it feel like? Has it changed?
Yeah.
Has it got bigger? Has it got smaller? Where has it changed? Where is it in your body now? So all of those things can be a really, kind of fun and helpful way of getting our children to tune in.
When my kids were little, we used to, well, I mean, we probably would do it now if we needed to, but we used to blow up a balloon, an imaginary balloon.
Yeah.
And when the balloon was big enough and it was ready enough, they could let it go and say goodbye to that kind of, that feeling that they were experiencing or something. But it's also it brings just a moment of quietness and stillness, and we're here, we're in this room, we're together, and it's like you were saying, Becky, it takes time. We got to carve out time.
Yeah, I think in our family, it's been almost a stage before that is validating the feelings. I know one of my children really is very sensitive about stuffed animals, really loves them to pieces. They're like real friends in his life. And my other son will use that to wind him up, because it's a great opportunity. He can make fun of him and he'll tease the animal, and my son will get upset. And we laughed at that a couple of times initially, and then were suddenly horrified to realise actually that feeling was valid, even though it felt silly and it was quite funny to us as adults. But for him, those feelings were very real and attached to these stuffed animals. So it's like we've had to realise that we need to validate and say it's okay that he's sensitive about that, and it's okay that at this stage of life that's where he's at. And so then we can move on to the processing of the emotion, I think. So recognising the emotions. But we kind of almost had to validate it first as parents, I think.
Which actually, when you come to teenagers and older children, sometimes we don't like those emotions. Sometimes we don't like what they're thinking and the way they're thinking about certain things and the emotions that it's causing. And it can be really easy for us as parents to jump in and say, you shouldn't think like that, you shouldn't feel like that, that's not okay. But, I mean, it's another really big stage emotionally, isn't it?
Yeah,
especially when it's personal.
Yeah.
If they feel like they hate you at the moment, you're not going to want to feel that, are you?
Let me just vouch for myself right now.
I know,
No, it's really, really important, is it? And it's then about, checking in with yourself as well. So not only, sometimes you're having to do both at the same time, aren't you? You're having to kind of, am I within my window of tolerance still? Am I getting pushed outside? How do I get back in? Do I need to go and take a time out before I come back and deal with this? All of those things. But validation is absolutely crucial. Our children, how are we going to expect them to be able to express or work through their emotions if they don't feel that they're valid in the first place? It's all about helping them to feel seen and acknowledged. Is absolutely crucial.
I think if we really want to be preventative in this, because there are quieter times, aren't they? 9-year-olds, I think, are lovely. And then sometimes come 11, you go, oh, wow, that's a lot more emotion for us to deal with. We've just had a quiet season and now it's upon us. But we can be preventative, can't we? We can put those things, those cultures into place in our home and, take the time before bedtime, or, we've talked already about how great meal times are for just being able to give everybody an opportunity to say what they're frustrated about. And I think as well, having a safe place for people to talk, knowing that you can saying it, explaining it isn't a bad thing. And if it is attached to something that we need to process through, then the confidence that can be done without us heaping shame onto our kids or, exasperating that process at all. It takes some planning, doesn't it?
It does, and it's about kind of creating a culture within your family, and both parents, if you're parenting with somebody else, trying to be on the same page as well, because that's often a real challenge for us as parents, isn't it? If one parent is okay and really expresses emotions freely, and the other one really struggles with that, there's some work to do, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
There. But I think family group meetings are really a good idea. Sometimes we have like a thing where, because this, Marina, in our family, we're all very expressive and we all have a lot to say, and sometimes we can tend to get louder and louder and louder and have to feel like we have to express ourselves even bigger to be heard. And so actually having a cushion, and the cushion gets passed around, and so whoever has the cushion can speak. That's sometimes a helpful way so that everyone does get heard.
Yeah, amazing. Ladies, thank you so much. It's been really fantastic to speak to you both. And thank you also for tuning in with us again today. Don't forget there are so many more resources available and more episodes of The Mum Show you can come and join us on. So please do just follow this website link on the screen. And in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.